Hey everybody, it's Anna and welcome back to my booktube channel. This video is going to be my Geekly Wrap-Up for the week of December 23rd through December 29th. If you've been watching my 8 Nights of Vlognica series, this is also the week where I read the majority of the Hanukkah-themed romance novels that I was doing as my, Year of Reading Romantically project for the month of December. So buckle up because I have 6 books to talk about here and let's go ahead and get through them. So the first book that I read was actually a novella that I read for 8 Nights of Hanukkah, which is called Hearts Alight by Elliot Cooper. This is a really adorable story about a boy named Dave that falls in love with an older man named Amit, and he is a golem, which is basically like a figure made out of clay and then brought to life by magic, like word magic from Jewish mythology and folklore. And this was a really adorable, just soft, sweet novella about the two of them falling in love. There were D&D dice exchanged as gifts. There was just a lot of adorable softness, and I really enjoyed this book. This was what I kind of needed as a way to take my mind off of the fact that we were dealing with my lost dog. After that, I read 8 Kinky Nights, an FF Hanukkah romance by Zan West, which I realize now is the pen name of Corey Alexander that they use when they're writing their, more romantic type stories as opposed to their straight up, SFF stories. And I really adored this book. This was about 2 queer, autistic, fat Jewish femmes that were falling in love with each other after being friends for a really long time, 30 years or something like that. It was a really long time that they had been friends. And basically, exploring their sexuality and relationship through, dominance and submission, which is not something I ever thought that I would find myself reading about because I'm a pretty vanilla bean. So this is not the kind of thing that I think I would have picked up if it hadn't been for the fact that I was looking specifically for Hanukkah romance novels, and it really didn't disappoint. I absolutely loved the relationship between these 2 characters. The fact that they were friends before and that they were so respectful of each other's way of communicating and consent. There was some quality descriptions of stimming and playing with STEM toys and special interests and stuff like that. So obviously, I really enjoyed that part of it. It did take me most of the, 8 nights to actually read this book because it's surprisingly long. I read it on my Kindle, and so I was like, oh, I thought that it was going to be just a little short story, and then no, it was like a 400-page novel. So I really enjoyed that. I did give it 5 out of 5 stars. Okay, then I read a couple of graphic novels. I read the second installment in the Superman Smashes the Klan series, which is written by Jean Luen Yang and illustrated by Gurihiru. This continues the story of Roberta and Tommy, who are 2 Chinese-American children that are finding themselves targeted by white supremacists in their area, and then with the help of Superman, they are doing their best to smash the fictional Klan of the Fiery Cross, which is a fictional analog to the KKK in real life. This is based off of the classic, wildly popular radio series from the 1940s, but reinterpreted anew for today's audience in graphic novel form. This is amazing. I don't want to give away a lot of the plot because they're pretty short, as you can see, so if you want to read this, I'd recommend just getting the first 2 because the second one is out now, and I am really enjoying that. I read another graphic novel that I have been meaning to get to for a while, and I finally found a spare copy of it, waiting on a table at the library, which is They Called Us Enemy, which is a graphic memoir by George Takei. I feel like most people that are on the internet know who he is, but just in case you don't, he is a gay Japanese-American man that became famous for playing Hikaru Sulu, the pilot of the Starship Enterprise on the original Star Trek series, and this is his memoir of his childhood growing up in incarceration in a Japanese-American internment camp during World War II. This is, of course, very timely story considering the fact that the incarceration of children and other people that are just trying to exist in this country or come here for a better life is continuing, especially at our border with Mexico. And George Takei does actually address this intersection with current events towards the end of his book. This was a really powerful story, just reading what it was like from his perspective as a child growing up this way made me think of how many children are currently growing up behind bars being treated like criminals and enemies that are going to have similar experiences or write similar stories or share similar commonalities when they're old enough to and when they're grown up to. And yeah, it kind of breaks your heart to read about it. So, yeah. So also at the end of this book is a lot about like the various protests against like President Trump's Muslim immigration ban and all of these other kind of executive orders and things that he has signed. And it's really weird, like reading in a graphic novel that is supposed to be about history, things that like you have actually done, like seeing panels about like those protests against the travel ban and against the children in cages, and knowing that like I was there holding a sign at some of those in my cities and being like, wow, this is weird, because I didn't think of it as being particularly historical necessarily while it was happening, and seeing it already so quickly, like in less than 5 years, the turnaround of it being in a book that very deeply engages with history and very deeply engages with trauma and memory and stuff like that was just incredibly powerful. So I would definitely recommend everyone to read this book. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Go do what you can to support human rights and civil rights. Donate money, donate time, call your senators and representatives. I feel like if you're watching this, you probably know the drill, but consider this another call to action and call to encouragement to go do those things anyways, because justice never sleeps. Okay. The next book that I read was for, again, the 8 Nights of Hanukkah read-along romance novel thing, which is called 8 Kisses, 8 All-New Tales of Holiday Romance, which is edited... Oh no! I lost my Goodreads page. Hold on. Silly. Now it won't work. Okay. It was called 8 Kisses, 8 All-New Tales of Holiday Romance by Mindy Klasky, and this was an anthology of 8 short romance stories that all center around themes of Hanukkah and this time of year. And I didn't really care for this book. I get what it was trying to do, and I think it's important that it exists, because I don't think that there is any other like short holiday romance anthology that takes place around the holidays that isn't exclusively or almost exclusively about Christmas. But it just doesn't do it for me, because I feel like I can't get invested in the characters' relationships in such a short form. I think that the short form works really well as like a quick setup for a relationship, and then the story can end on like an optimistic note of like, oh gee, I wonder what they're going to go do next. The other thing about this is that it was pretty lacking in terms of diversity. Like, there were 8 stories. All of them were exclusively like cisgender, heterosexual pairings. There were no people of color that were main characters in this book, and that's kind of tragic, because I don't know, like Judaism is a very like diverse religious, cultural, and ethnic umbrella, and there are queer Jews, there are Jews that are not white, there are a lot of different traditions within that, and I was just kind of disappointed that like even though this exists, there wasn't really that much diversity included in the book, which, I don't know, like made me feel less inclined to be super excited about it. But I did give it 3 out of 5 stars, because I think, again, it's important that this exists, because this representation is important. I just kind of was left wanting more out of both the stories and the types of people about whom these stories were being told. Wow. There comes my, like, former Latin student in that sentence structure. Wow, okay. And then the last book that I read was partially an effort by me to read a bunch of books that I've had on my Kindle for forever, and I don't remember how long I've had this one, at least a year probably. But I read This Will Be My Undoing by Morgan Jerkins, which is kind of a memoir/essay collection about her experiences growing up as a Black girl and now currently living as a Black woman in America and in the world. Her experience being in an often maligned minority when she goes to Princeton University, and as a like comparative literature student traveling around the world and seeing like how she is both hyper visible and invisible as a Black woman, both in America and in the other countries that she travels to for work or study. This book contains a lot of really heavy subject matter. It deals with violence, police brutality, rape, and sexual assault. It engages very deeply with racism that is both the sort of like more genteel parts of power structures and also the sort of ugly, overt, in your face of slurs and outright discrimination and bullying. This was a really good book. I read it really slowly again because it was very hard to read, and it made me think more deeply about things that I, as a white person, don't really have to worry about or consider or think about, and how like really that is the definition of privilege. Privilege means that you get to experience something at arm's length. You get the privilege of only having to study about this type of oppression or read about this type of oppression instead of actually having to experience it yourself, which it's one thing to know that like cerebrally, to know it in your mind in an intellectual sense, and it's another thing to like be able to read and listen to somebody else's personal life story in a way that, I don't know, it can reach you in a different way than reading about overarching statistics or power structures or other like systems of oppression does not necessarily reach you, because you are not forced to engage with the personal aspect of it when you're reading about like more macro level systems and things like that. So the book was really, really good. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, and that concludes everything that I read this week. So if you would like, please leave a comment down below about any of these books that you have read or are interested in. I know that this like ended up being kind of weirdly binary in terms of like, yay, happy holiday stories, and oh my goodness, serious world life events, but it just is like that sometimes, you know, that's kind of how life is and how it works. So yeah, if you enjoyed this video, please do give a sub to my channel if you'd like to see more. That is the best way to get updates. All of my information is linked down below as well. Thank you all, as always, very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!